Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources, peel back the layers, and really extract the most vital insights to help you become truly well-informed.
That's the goal.
Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic that, well, I think resonates with anyone who's ever tried to master a new language. We're talking about achieving native-like fluency in English. And our mission today is to unpack a really comprehensive guide focused on becoming truly fluent. We're especially going to tackle that common, frustrating hurdle of slow talk.
Yes, the hesitation.
Exactly. The hesitation, the pauses, that sort of constant mental translation that can make communication feel, well, less natural, like your brain is running just a few seconds behind your mouth sometimes.
Indeed. And we've got a fantastic set of insights here from Mastering Native English Fluency, a comprehensive guide. And it's really refreshing because this isn't just about, memorizing grammar rules or vocabulary lists, which is often the default focus, isn't it?
Totally. That's what you get in school mostly.
Right. Instead, it offers a more holistic approach to language acquisition that frequently gets overlooked, especially when you're trying to overcome that internal friction, that mental block that leads to slower, less confident speech.
That internal friction.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because for so many learners, the biggest frustration is feeling like their thoughts are moving at, native speed, but their words are just stuck in slow motion. It's maddening.
I can imagine.
So this deep dive, we're going to explore some really practical paths from the guide to bridge that gap, helping you not just know English, but actually feel and speak it instinctively, naturally.
And hopefully faster, with that effortless flow we're all kind of aiming for.
Precisely. Less of that grinding internal gear process.
Okay, so let's unpack this first big idea from the guide. It sounds almost deceptively simple, but it's presented as absolutely foundational. It's about cultivating an English-rich environment.
Immersion.
Right. It's not just about opening a textbook, is it? It's about actually transforming your daily life. The source really emphasizes the absolute necessity of being constantly exposed to English.
Yeah, it uses the analogy of how babies learn, doesn't it?
It does. Like how babies learn their native tongue just through constant kind of inescapable immersion all day, every day. It's about making English as ubiquitous as, well, living, basically.
Soaking it in through your pores almost?
Pretty much. Practically. This means things like watching English movies or, endless YouTube videos.
We all do that anyway.
True. Listening to English music, podcasts, radio. The guide even suggests changing your phone or your computer settings to English, just surrounding yourself.
It's just changes that add up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making English as commonplace and unavoidable as brushing your teeth or eating meals. But okay, here's the question. How does this constant auditory and visual input, this sort of relentless surrounding of yourself with the language, how does that actually help combat that persistent slow talk? Those moments where your brain feels like it's lagging behind, forcing you to pause and search. What's actually happening in our brains during this, passive but powerful immersion?
Well, this point is truly foundational because it taps directly into how our brains are actually wired for language acquisition, not just rule memorization, which is a key difference.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Studies in neurolinguistics show that consistent, varied exposure literally starts to rewire your brain. It builds specific neural networks, pathways, if you will, that allow for automatic rather than analytical language processing.
Automatic. So less conscious effort.
Exactly. Instead of consciously trying to dredge up a grammar rule or search your mental dictionary for a vocabulary word, your brain starts to recognize patterns and retrieve language much more intuitively.
Great.
A bit like how a musician learns to play a piece without thinking about every single individual note after a while.
Okay, that makes sense. Muscle memory, but for language.
Sort of, yeah. It's this subconscious assimilation, this constant input, that significantly reduces what psychologists call cognitive load.
Cognitive load. Sounds heavy.
It is. It's the mental effort your brain has to expend. Imagine trying to drive a car while simultaneously solving a complex math problem. Your brain is just overloaded, right?
Definitely. Can't do both well.
Right. So when you're constantly exposed to English in natural contexts, watching a movie, listening to music, without the pressure of having to actively translate or respond immediately, your brain gets accustomed to the sounds, the underlying grammar patterns, the natural rhythm.
It just absorbs it.
It does. It becomes familiar with the terrain. So when you do need to speak, your brain isn't working nearly as hard just to decode sounds or form basic sentences. It's already comfortable.
So less effort means more resources for actually speaking.
Precisely. This reduction in cognitive effort is absolutely crucial for reducing hesitation and significantly increasing your speech speed and overall fluidity. You're moving from a purely analytical, step-by-step process to a more intuitive, almost automatic one.
Which lets the words flow out more naturally, less of that agonizing slow talk.
Exactly. You're paving the way for smoother communication.
That makes incredible sense. It's like you're basically programming your brain to just default to English,
Yeah.
reducing that internal friction we talked about. And building on that idea of immersive listening, the guide makes another really important point. It's subtle, but I think it's powerful. Practicing listening to different accents.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. Yeah.
Because English, as we know, it's a truly global language.
Yeah.
Native speakers come with this huge multitude of accents. British, American, Australian, Irish, South African, Indian, Canadian. The list just goes on and on.
It really does.
And the source highlights that if you rely on just one accent for your listening practice, say you only watch American movies.
Which is easy to do sometimes.
Right. You can find yourself quite limited and maybe even experience that slow talk simply because you encounter the broader, diverse world of English speakers and you're thrown off.
I remember trying to understand a really strong Scottish accent for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
It honestly felt like I was trying to decode a completely different language for a minute. It took real concentration.
I've been there. So the practical advice here is simple but effective. Watch shows from diverse English-speaking countries. Listen to international podcasts. Maybe explore YouTube channels featuring speakers from different regions.
Mix it up.
Exactly. So it's not enough just to listen to English. It's about listening broadly, embracing the full spectrum of its global sound. What's really interesting here is how this prepares you for real-world conversations, where you will encounter all sorts of speakers, and also how it helps you develop maybe a more balanced, adaptable speaking style yourself. And I imagine this directly helps you overcome that frustrating slow talk when you're just trying to figure out what someone said, because your brain isn't suddenly struggling with unfamiliar sound patterns.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture of natural, fluent, fast speech, understanding diverse accents significantly minimizes what we call listening effort.
Listening effort.
Okay. When your brain encounters an accent it's not used to, it actually has to work harder just to decode the sounds, differentiate the words, and piece together the meaning. Think of it like trying to tune an old radio dial. There's a lot of static and effort before the signal comes through clearly.
Right, that extra processing time.
Exactly. That additional cognitive load, even if it's only for a fraction of a second, it actually detracts from your ability to formulate your own responses quickly and spontaneously.
Yeah.
You're using up precious mental bandwidth just to understand.
Leaving less energy for crafting your own speech.
Precisely. So, by training your ear to a wide range of accents, you essentially eliminate that initial decoding struggle. You free up those cognitive resources, which can then be entirely dedicated to constructing your own thoughts and sentences in English.
Makes sense.
This makes your speech less hesitant and far more spontaneous because you're not pausing, even subconsciously, to process what the other person just said. It helps prevent those really frustrating moments where you literally feel your words getting stuck because you didn't quite catch something.
Which kills the conversational flow and starts the whole slow talk spiral.
Exactly. It maintains that flow. And as a bonus, it often helps you develop a more adaptable, perhaps more neutral-sounding accent yourself, which is ultimately easier for a wider audience to understand. That further reduces any potential communication friction.
So it's about building a robust, versatile listening comprehension that then directly fuels your speaking agility.
You got it. They feed into each other.
That makes perfect sense. Your brain becomes like a universal adapter for English, no software updates needed. Okay, now this next section, this gets right to the core, I think, of why many learners experience slow talk. It's all about the internal monologue.
Ah, the voice inside your head.
Exactly. The guide identifies a major, almost invisible obstacle, the ingrained habit of thinking in your native language and then trying to translate those thoughts, often word for word, into English.
Translation layer.
Yes. And it pinpoints this translation layer as a primary source of slow, sometimes awkward, or even just plain incorrect sentences. It's like you have this tiny, overworked interpreter living inside your head.
Constantly running behind.
Right. slowing down every single thought before it can even attempt to become an English word. You can almost feel the gears grinding when that happens.
It's exhausting.
So the practical application offered in the guide is to actively, consciously train your brain to think directly in English.
Easier said than done, maybe.
Well, it suggests starting really small, with incredibly simple, mundane daily observations. For example, if you're having breakfast, you actively think to yourself, I'm eating toast, or this tea is hot, in English.
Not translating it from your native thought.
Correct. If you're walking down the street, the sky is blue, that car is red. It's about consciously forcing that mental switch, even for the simplest things. So, okay, what does this all mean for someone who is constantly translating in their head, maybe often without even realizing they're doing it? It seems like a massive, deeply ingrained hurdle to overcome for truly natural, fast-flowing speech.
Ow.
How do you even begin to untangle that internal linguistic mess?
Well, you've hit on an absolutely critical question for anyone chasing real fluency. Can you truly achieve that native-like speed and eliminate slow talk if you're always running a translation program in your head?
Seems unlikely.
And the answer, according to this source, and frankly backed by a lot of linguistic research, is a resounding no. You really can't. This internal translation causes significant measurable delay, and it severely limits your spontaneity.
How so specifically?
Well, every single time you construct a sentence, your brain is essentially doing double duty. First, it forms the thought in your native language. Then it has to convert it word by word or maybe concept by concept into English. This double processing is inherently slow and incredibly mentally taxing.
Like writing everything down twice before you speak.
Exactly. Imagine having to do that for every sentence in a conversation. It's completely unsustainable for fluent speech. So by forcing yourself, and it does take force initially to think directly in English, you're building direct, instantaneous links between concepts and the English words for them.
Bypassing the middleman.
You're bypassing that intermediary native language entirely. It's a kind of mental reprogramming, like changing the default language setting on your brain's operating system from your native tongue to English.
That sounds tough.
Oh, it will certainly feel difficult, maybe even unnatural at first. You might find yourself stumbling internally, or your thoughts feeling slower initially as you search for the English structure. But, and this is key, this process fundamentally streamlines the entire thought-to-speech process over time.
It tackles the bottleneck.
It directly counters slow talk by removing the biggest bottleneck in spontaneous communication. You're training your brain to switch from interpreter mode to English native mode, allowing your thoughts to become English words without that burdensome, time-consuming detour.
So the advice is, start small, be consistent, and gradually increase the complexity of what you're thinking about in English.
Precisely. Narrate your actions, your plans, your observations. It gets easier.
Okay, that mental shift sounds incredibly challenging, but also potentially incredibly liberating if you can manage it. And building on that idea of bypassing the native language, the guide offers another really smart, subtle, but powerful strategy. Using an English-to-English dictionary.
Yes, monolingual dictionaries.
Right. The core idea here is to move beyond simply translating new words into your native language, which is what most of us instinctively do, right?
It's the default, yeah.
Instead, the recommendation is to learn the meaning of new English words using other English words. So, for example, if you look up a word like confident, instead of immediately finding its equivalent in your first language, you read its English definition, something like feeling sure about your own abilities.
Staying within the English framework.
Exactly. The guide specifically recommends readily available tools like the Cambridge Dictionary app, Oxford Learner's Dictionary, or Merriam-Webster, which are often designed specifically for learners and provide clear, simple English definitions.
Good resources.
Now, this seems like a seemingly small change in habit, doesn't it? Just a slight alteration in how you look up words. But how does this seemingly minor shift impact overall fluency and, crucially, the speed at which we process and retrieve language? How does it chip away at that slow talk?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is precisely how it reinforces that think in English strategy we were just discussing. It's not a separate tactic, it's deeply connected.
How so?
When you learn a new word through its English definition, you're not just acquiring a new vocabulary item in isolation, you're actively strengthening and expanding your internal network of English concepts and words.
An internal network. I like that.
Yeah, you're building a richer, more integrated mental lexicon where English words are defined by and connected to other English words. It forms a kind of self-contained system in your mind. Imagine a vast, interconnected web in your brain where every English word leads directly to other English words and related concepts without needing to jump outside that web to your native language just to understand the meaning.
Okay, so it keeps you immersed even when learning new words.
Precisely. So when you encounter that word later in conversation or reading, your brain can access its meaning and all its related concepts directly within that English framework. It doesn't need to perform a cross-language lookup, which takes time and mental effort. Another bottleneck removed.
Exactly. This seamless integration means significantly faster recall and smoother sentence construction. When you define confident as feeling sure about your own abilities in English, you're reinforcing the idea that confidence exists entirely within the English sphere of thought for you. You're not creating that extra mental bridge back to your native language.
The less mental bridging means faster processing.
And that efficiency is absolutely critical for overcoming verbal hesitations and those slow talk moments. It allows for a much more fluid and natural conversational flow because you're thinking and understanding in English. You're training yourself to operate entirely within the target language.
Okay, that's a really compelling argument for switching dictionary habits. Now, let's pivot a bit. We've talked about input, internal processing. Let's talk about actually producing the language.
Output, speaking.
Right, which is where, let's face it, a lot of the slow talk visibly happens, often due to shyness, self-consciousness, or maybe just a lack of opportunity to practice.
The fear factor is real, totally. The guide states unequivocally that speaking is paramount, but it acknowledges that common challenge. Many learners avoid it because they're shy or nervous, especially if they don't have anyone readily available to practice with.
A very common situation.
Yeah. So the solution offered is actually incredibly liberating and I think often overlooked. Practice speaking aloud, even if you're completely alone.
Talking to yourself, it sounds odd, but it works.
It does. The practical application here is really quite ingenious. You can describe your actions aloud as you do them, narrate your thoughts, or recount your daily events. You can literally stand in front of a mirror and pretend to have a conversation.
Or record yourself.
Or record yourself speaking, yes, and then review it later for pronunciation and fluency. This is so liberating for learners who don't have constant access to native speakers, and it completely removes that immediate pressure of judgment, doesn't it?
Takes the audience away.
But how does this seemingly simple act of talking to yourself actually contribute to overall fluency and maybe even more importantly, to building the confidence needed to overcome that internal slow talk mechanism that just freezes you up in real conversations?
Well, this strategy directly tackles a core psychological barrier to fluency, that pervasive fear of making mistakes in front of others, which, as you pointed out, is a massive contributor to slow talk. People freeze because they're afraid of sounding stupid.
Been there.
By practicing alone, you completely remove that immediate external pressure and the intense self-monitoring that comes with it. The very act of articulation, just physically moving your mouth, tongue, shaping the sounds, even if it's just to yourself, trains those muscles in the brain to actually produce English sounds and sentence structures without the constant paralyzing self-editing that happens when you feel observed.
So it's like physical practice for your mouth.
Absolutely. It's building muscle memory for speech. And recording yourself, as the guide suggests, provides objective feedback. It allows for self-correction without the social anxiety. You hear yourself, maybe you notice you mispronounced a word or your sentence structure was clunky, and you can course correct without any embarrassment.
Learning from your own voice.
Exactly. Over time, this repeated, low-stakes practice significantly reduces the mental and physical effort required for basic articulation and sentence formation. This makes spontaneous speech less slow and more automatic because the physical act of speaking becomes more of a routine rather than a high-pressure performance fraught with potential errors.
So you're building fluency in a safe space, accumulating successful speech attempts, which then empowers you for the real world.
Precisely. It's like a musician practicing scales and arpeggios in private before they tackle a concerto on stage. Foundational work.
That makes perfect sense. It's about getting comfortable with the mechanics and building that internal resilience without the external pressure. Okay, building on that idea of active production, the guide introduces a technique that sounds incredibly powerful, almost artistic in a way.
Oh, which one?
Imitating native speakers, often referred to as shadowing.
Shadowing. Yes, very effective.
The core idea is that native speakers have these natural patterns in their pronunciation, their tone, rhythm, even things like body language that go far beyond just the words themselves. The source suggests that actively imitating these patterns is a truly powerful learning tool for achieving that native-like flow.
It's about capturing the music of the language.
Exactly. For practical application, it says you can choose a favorite English-speaking YouTuber, maybe an actor from a show you love, or a news presenter you admire. You watch a short clip, then you pause it, and you repeat the sentences exactly as you heard them.
Copying everything.
Copying not just the words, but their mouth movements, if you can see them, their tone of voice, their intonation, even their pauses. It's about not just what you say, but critically, how you say it.
The delivery.
Yes, and this is where it gets truly fascinating. It sounds like a fantastic way to internalize that music of the language we just mentioned. And I imagine mastering this music is absolutely critical for sounding natural and avoiding that stilted delivery, which, let's be honest, is a huge contributor to slow talk, isn't it? When you sound unnatural, you often speak slowly because you're constantly self-correcting or trying too hard to match a pattern you don't quite feel.
Precisely. If we connect this shadowing technique to the bigger picture of natural, rapid conversation, what it really helps you internalize is the prosody of English.
Prosody. Okay, explain that a bit more.
Prosody is basically the music of the language. It encompasses things like the way your voice rises and falls, that's intonation, where you place emphasis or stress within words and sentences, the natural rhythm and flow.
Like the melody and beat of speech.
Exactly. For instance, consider a simple sentence like, "I didn't steal the money." If you stress steal, it implies you did something else with the money, right?
Yeah, maybe you borrowed it.
But if you say, "I didn't steal the money," with the stress on money, it implies you stole something else entirely.
Okay. Same words, different meaning based on the music.
Precisely. And mastering this song of English is vital not just for sounding natural, but crucially for being easily understood by native speakers. And when people understand you easily, that massively boosts your confidence and directly reduces hesitation.
Because you're not getting confused looks.
Exactly. When your speech aligns more closely with native patterns, when your words rise and fall at the right points, when you naturally stress the correct syllables, listeners process your words much more effortlessly. They don't have to strain to understand you, which makes the whole interaction smoother.
And when they understand you easily, you feel less self-conscious.
Right. You feel less self-conscious about your delivery, leading to smoother, less slow, and more fluid speech. Shadowing physically trains your mouth and your brain to produce that authentic English flow. It takes away the mental burden of consciously figuring out how a sentence should sound and replaces it with a more intuitive sense of its natural rhythm.
It's like learning to dance to the rhythm of English, rather than just knowing the individual steps.
That's a great analogy. Absolutely.
That distinction between just knowing the words and knowing the music of the words is so powerful. And leading directly from that, the guide stresses the importance of actively practicing pronunciation and intonation separately too.
Getting the sounds right and the melody.
Yes. It highlights that clear pronunciation, meaning saying the individual sounds of English correctly, and natural intonation that rise and fall, the vocal melody, are both absolutely crucial for comprehension and for truly sounding native-like. English is described as having a distinct musical rhythm with stressed syllables and words.
Which can be very different from other languages.
Very true. And if your pronunciation is unclear, or maybe your intonation is flat or follows the pattern of your native language, people might have real trouble understanding you, even if your grammar is technically perfect.
Yeah, the "what did you say" moments.
Exactly. So for practical application, the source suggests leveraging fantastic modern tools. Things like the Elsa Speak app, or websites like Youglish, which lets you search YouTube for specific words in context, or Forvo for hearing pronunciations from various native speakers.
Technology can really help here.
Definitely. It also says you should record yourself, listen back critically, and compare your speech to native speakers, really honing in on the differences. The advice is to focus especially on sounds that might be alien to your native language.
Like the "this" sounds.
Exactly, the TH in think or that, maybe the English R sound, or even silent letters which can trip people up. And importantly, it says to practice full sentences for that natural rhythm and flow, not just individual words in isolation.
Context is key for rhythm.
So it's about mastering the precise sound and the flowing song of the language. How does getting these elements right directly impact the speed and ease of communication? Specifically, how does it combat that feeling of slow talk that often seems to arise from just the physical difficulty in producing the sounds correctly or smoothly.
Well, this raises that really important question. Why do people sometimes experience slow talk even when their grammar is spot on and they know all the words they need?
Yeah, what's holding them back?
Often it's precisely because they're struggling with the physical production of the sounds, or they haven't internalized the natural rhythm and intonation patterns of English. These struggles aren't just mental, they are physical, involving the precise, rapid movements of your tongue, your lips, your jaw.
The mechanics of speech.
Exactly. And if you're constantly fighting with those mechanics, it inevitably breaks up your flow. It leads to those noticeable pauses, the hesitations, the slightly unnatural pacing. And when your pronunciation is unclear or your intonation is flat or wrong for English, listeners may have to work harder to understand you.
Which forces them to ask you to repeat.
Right, or rephrase, which inherently slows down the entire interaction and makes your speech feel disjointed and, well, slow.
So mastering pronunciation and intonation isn't just about sounding better.
No, it's about making communication easier for both sides. By mastering these elements, by making the physical act of producing English sounds and rhythms more automatic, more effortless, you not only become more comprehensible to others, but your speech becomes significantly more effortless for you.
Less mental energy on the how.
Precisely. Imagine trying to type quickly, but always fumbling and hitting the wrong keys. You'd be slow and frustrated, right?
Definitely.
Similarly, when the English sounds come out smoothly and correctly, and the rhythm feels natural, your brain can stop focusing on the mechanics of speech and instead focus entirely on the message you want to convey.
Freeing up brain power.
Exactly. That reduced cognitive and physical burden means less hesitation, fewer pauses while you mentally prepare the sound, and a more fluent, confident, and ultimately much less slow delivery. You spend less mental energy on how to say something and more on what you want to say, making conversations feel much more natural and spontaneous.
Okay, this next point from the guide feels absolutely critical, especially for overcoming that pervasive slow talk that, as we've touched on, is so often deeply rooted in the fear of making mistakes.
The perfectionism trap.
Exactly. The guide says that many learners get completely stuck because they focus too much on speaking perfectly. They worry excessively about every little grammar rule, about every single word being absolutely precise.
Analyzing every utterance.
Right. And this anxiety leads them to speak incredibly slowly, or sometimes just not at all. And it makes a vital point. Native speakers don't speak perfectly either. We make grammar mistakes. We hesitate. We restart sentences all the time.
It's true. Listen closely to any natural conversation.
The key, according to the source, is confidence and fluency, not flawlessness. It's not about being perfectly correct every single time. It's about being effectively understood and maintaining that communicative flow.
Communication over perfection.
Yes. So the practical application offered is incredibly liberating for many, I think. Prioritize getting your ideas out clearly and smoothly, rather than stopping yourself mid-sentence to mentally correct grammar. You can always refine the grammar later on your own time, maybe with that mistake journal or using tools.
Let it flow first.
And a suggested exercise here is truly insightful and, frankly, probably a game changer for many learners. Set a timer for just 1 minute and talk nonstop about a topic, any topic. Even if you know you're making mistakes, just keep talking.
The nonstop speaking challenge.
Yeah, it's basically permission to be imperfect, which for so many learners feels incredibly freeing. So how does this sort of radical shift in focus directly combat slow talk and the paralysis that often accompanies that fear of error?
Well, what's truly fascinating and I think deeply insightful here is that this directly addresses the root cause of so much slow talk. It's not always lack of knowledge, it's often that crippling fear of imperfection.
It's psychological.
Absolutely. This fear paralyzes many speakers. It leads to excessive self-monitoring, an overactive internal editor that dissects every word before it even dares leave their mouth. It's like having a meticulous, terrifying proofreader standing over your shoulder, making you pause and second-guess absolutely everything.
That sounds exhausting and slow.
It is. So by actively prioritizing getting ideas out, even if imperfectly, you're fundamentally retraining your brain to think and speak faster and more continuously. You're essentially telling your brain, it's okay to make a bit of a mess right now. The important thing is to keep moving forward.
Build momentum.
Exactly. And that 1 minute nonstop exercise is brilliant, Precisely because it forces your brain to generate continuous output. It effectively bypasses that overactive internal editor that causes all the hesitation and delay. You literally don't have time to correct yourself meticulously, so you just speak.
You override the correction instinct.
You do. It's not about being grammatically perfect in that minute. It's about building momentum and confidence in the act of communication itself. This allows the language to flow more naturally, even if it's not grammatically flawless initially. That refinement can come later.
Right.
This mindset fundamentally frees the speaker from the heavy burden of constant self-correction and that internal translation loop, which, as we've discussed multiple times now, is a major contributor to a slower, more hesitant speaking pace. You're building a habit of fluent output over perfect output.
And over time, the fluency makes it easier to absorb the corrections later.
Exactly. It's about accepting imperfection as a necessary stepping stone to eventual mastery, rather than letting it be a roadblock. It unlocks the flow.
That mental shift from perfection to just propulsion sounds incredibly liberating. Okay, and to make that fluent output sound even more natural, less like, textbook English.
Less robotic.
Yeah, less robotic. The guide stresses the importance of mastering common phrases and idioms. The core idea here is that true native fluency goes way beyond just textbook grammar. It includes embracing real-world language, idioms, common slang, frequently used phrases.
The stuff people actually say.
Right. These often don't make literal sense if you try to translate them directly piece by piece, but they're everyday expressions native speakers use constantly, often without even thinking about it.
They're like conversational shortcuts.
That's a good way to put it. For practical application, the source suggests actively collecting phrases you hear maybe in movies, music, or just conversations online. Use a notebook or an app. And then, the crucial part, actively try to use them in your own conversations.
Put them into practice.
Yeah. Examples given include using something like "I'm broke" instead of constructing the more literal "I have no money," or using "let's hang out" instead of the slightly more formal "let's meet."
Little things that make a big difference in naturalness.
Definitely. This really highlights the gap that can exist between purely academic understanding and practical real-world communication. So, how do these seemingly small linguistic details, these idioms and phrases, contribute to a more natural, less slow conversational style? Why are they so crucial for truly blending in and sounding fluid?
Well, if we connect this back to the bigger picture of spontaneous, flowing conversation, using idioms and common phrases makes your speech sound significantly more authentic and much less translated.
Less like you're reading from a script.
Exactly. Think about it. When a learner constructs a sentence like, "I currently possess insufficient funds," it's grammatically correct, maybe, but incredibly stilted.
Nobody talks like that.
Right. A native speaker would just say, "I'm broke," or "I'm skint." The learner might pause, mentally construct that literal, grammatically perfect but unnatural sentence, and then say it, creating a small but noticeable moment of slow talk or awkwardness.
Okay.
But when you understand and can readily use these prepackaged linguistic units, these conversational shortcuts, as you called them, you avoid all that mental gymnastics of trying to construct literal sentences from scratch.
You grab the ready-made phrase.
Exactly. Instead of building a sentence from individual words and complex grammar rules every time, you're accessing a chunk of language that already conveys a common meaning efficiently. This significantly speeds up your response time in conversation because you're using these ready-made phrases that native speakers recognize and use effortlessly.
Less construction time, faster output.
Precisely. It allows for much more fluid and natural interactions, reducing the pauses and the awkwardness that can characterize slow talk when a learner is trying to rephrase a common concept in an overly literal or formal way. Plus, using these phrases signals a deeper understanding of the language and the culture.
Which makes you sound more integrated.
Right, less like you're constantly performing a mental translation, which in turn further boosts your confidence and tends to accelerate your overall speech pace. You sound more like you belong in the conversation.
And speaking of belonging and integration, the guide makes another incredibly important point that goes beyond just the words and grammar. It talks about learning the culture behind the language.
Ah, the sociolinguistic aspect.
Yeah.
Crucial.
Yeah. The core idea is that to truly speak like a native, understanding the culture, or maybe cultures of English-speaking countries, is absolutely essential. This includes seemingly minor things like knowing the appropriate greetings for different situations, understanding how emotions are typically expressed, getting the nuances of humor.
Sarcasm. That's a big one in English.
Oh, definitely sarcasm. And even specific body language cues. It's all those unspoken rules, the kind of social dance that happens alongside the words.
Subtext of communication.
Exactly. For practical application, it suggests diving into cultural products, watch movies, comedy shows, news programs from diverse English-speaking countries. It gives that perfect example of understanding why, "Hey, what's up?" is such a common casual greeting in American English, and why responding with a very formal, "I am fine, thank you," and "you" might sound a bit off or awkward in that context.
Yeah, context is everything.
Right. And this also applies to things like understanding jokes, interpreting sarcasm correctly, and just engaging in comfortable small talk. This goes way beyond words. It's about the subtle social cues that really define natural interaction. So what's fascinating here is how does this cultural fluency impact linguistic fluency, especially when trying to avoid those pauses, that slow talk that can signify uncertainty about what's appropriate or expected in a social situation.
Well, this raises that vital question about social fluency, which is intrinsically deeply linked to linguistic fluency. They're not separate things. Language doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's all about context and effective social interaction.
Oh,
When you understand the cultural nuances, the unspoken rules of engagement for greetings, apologies, requests, humor, etc., your responses become more appropriate and critically much more spontaneous.
less hesitation about what should I say here.
Exactly. You avoid those internal debates about, is this too formal? Is this too casual? Was that a joke? How should I react to that statement? All of those internal Q&A sessions can lead to significant hesitations and that telltale slow talk.
Right, the brain freezes trying to calculate the social angle.
Precisely. For example, knowing the cultural norms for expressing sympathy or making a polite request or even just disagreeing respectfully means you don't have to pause and mentally construct a phrase from scratch, worrying if it sounds right culturally. You likely have a culturally appropriate response or phrase readily available in your mental toolkit.
So you could react more quickly and naturally.
Yes. This understanding allows for much smoother, more natural conversational transitions. Imagine someone tells a joke that relies heavily on a specific cultural reference you don't get. Your brain has to pause, try to decode it, maybe fail, and then you might give an awkward, delayed response, or maybe no response at all.
Kills the vibe and the flow.
Totally breaks the flow. But if you're culturally fluent, you get the reference, you can react naturally, maybe with an appropriate laugh or a witty comment back, and you maintain the conversational rhythm seamlessly. This significantly reduces those moments of slow talk that often arise purely from cultural uncertainty or social discomfort.
So it's about speaking with appropriate context, not just correct grammar.
Exactly. Which makes you a much more confident, adaptable, and ultimately rapid communicator in real-world situations.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the long game. We've covered immersion, thinking, speaking, mindset. But how do you sustain this journey? How do you keep building that confidence needed for truly fluent, natural conversation and keep that slow talk at bay for good?
Consistency and perspective.
Right. The guide starts by saying something absolutely fundamental. Correct your mistakes and, crucially, learn from them. The core idea isn't to avoid mistakes at all costs, but to see them differently. Mistakes are not failures. They are a natural and incredibly valuable part of the learning process.
They're data points.
Exactly. Like a scientist using failed experiments to refine their hypothesis. The key isn't to fear them, but to embrace them as opportunities to learn and improve.
A growth mindset towards errors.
Yeah. So for practical application, the source advises that when you notice you've made a mistake or someone corrects you, don't just brush it off. Take a moment to understand why it happened. What was the underlying rule you missed or misapplied? How can you fix it?
Analyze the error.
Right. This could mean asking native speakers for clarification, using grammar checking tools like Grammarly perhaps, or even leveraging AI tools like ChatGPT for corrections and, importantly, explanations that clarify the why.
Understand the pattern.
And it also strongly recommends maintaining a journal of your common recurring mistakes, almost like a personal do not repeat list for regular review. This is such a powerful reframe. Mistakes as teachers, not as sources of embarrassment. So how does this iterative process identify, understand, correct, review? How does that lead to a more confident and ultimately faster speaker? Someone who truly overcomes slow talk over the long term.
Well, this raises that important question that ties back into our earlier point about focusing on fluency over perfection, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If we're prioritizing getting ideas out, how do mistakes fit into that picture without causing constant stopping?
Right. Seems contradictory almost.
But it's not, really. Mistakes are absolutely critical for the refinement stage and for making that initial fluency sustainable and accurate over the long haul. By actively taking the time to understand and correct your errors, maybe after the conversation, using your journal, you're not just fixing a single instance of a mistake.
You're learning the system better.
You're reinforcing the correct pattern or rule in your brain. This significantly reduces the likelihood of you repeating that same error in future conversations. And fewer errors means fewer moments of stumbling, fewer instances of self-correction mid-sentence, less internal reprocessing during speech.
Smoother sailing.
Exactly. Think of it like debugging a computer program. Each bug you identify and fix makes the program run smoother, faster, and more reliably next time. Similarly, each language mistake you consciously understand and correct removes a potential point of friction or a mental traffic jam in your future speech.
Okay.
Each corrected mistake builds genuine competence and solidifies your understanding, which directly leads to a smoother, less hesitant, and ultimately more fluent delivery over time. It's about proactive improvement, not crippling self-criticism after every utterance.
So it's the disciplined feedback loop that transitions you from just hesitant attempts to more polished automatic speech.
Precisely. You reach a point where you don't even have to think about that particular mistake anymore, and that directly translates to less slow talk and much more fluid, confident conversations down the line.
That continuous improvement loop sounds absolutely essential. And the final, maybe overarching message from the guide brings us to a fundamental truth about acquiring any complex skill, really. The need to stay consistent and patient.
The long view.
Yeah. The core idea hammered home is that achieving native-like fluency, truly vanquishing slow talk, is a long journey. It's definitely not a sprint. It won't happen overnight or even in just a few months for most people, and expecting it to is just a recipe for frustration and maybe giving up.
Managing expectations is key.
But consistency, even in small increments, is presented as paramount for building lasting fluency and really leaving that hesitant speech behind.
Little and often.
Exactly. For practical application, the guide recommends practicing every single day, even if it's just for 15 or 30 minutes. Quality over just quantity sometimes. It suggests setting small, achievable goals.
Things you can actually stick to.
Right, like maybe learning 5 new phrases a week, or practicing that 1-minute nonstop speaking exercise daily. It also stresses the importance of acknowledging and celebrating your progress, however small it feels.
Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah. And crucially, finding ways to avoid giving up during those inevitable slow periods or plateaus where you feel like you're stuck and not progressing. We've all hit those.
Plateaus are normal in learning anything.
So this is truly the marathon, not the sprint. It's about building sustainable habits that last. Why is this persistence, this daily consistency, so crucial for someone trying to get past that initial, often frustrating slow talk phase and truly embed these new language patterns deep into their brain?
Well, what's truly fascinating, I think, about consistency is that it isn't just about accumulating hours of practice. It's about building momentum and, perhaps even more importantly, preventing regression.
Yeah.
Backsliding.
Losing ground if you stop.
Exactly. The human brain, especially when forming new complex connections like those needed for language, needs regular, consistent stimulation to maintain and strengthen those pathways. Think of language learning like building a muscle. If you only work out sporadically, you lose gains between sessions, maybe even get weaker, and you constantly feel like you're starting over.
Which is incredibly demotivating.
Hugely demotivating. Inconsistent practice leads to forgetting vocabulary, grammar fading, pronunciation getting rusty. You end up having to relearn things constantly, and that feels like slow progress, trapping learners in that slow talk loop of constant relearning and the hesitation that comes with uncertainty.
Okay.
So by practicing daily, even for those short focus periods, you keep the neural pathways active. You continue to strengthen them, making recall and production more efficient, more automatic. Setting those small, achievable goals makes the entire huge journey feel manageable.
Less overwhelming.
Right. It provides regular boosts of motivation as you hit those mini milestones, and it demonstrates tangible progress, which is fuel for continued effort. This sustained, consistent effort reinforces all the other tips we've discussed today. It solidifies direct thinking in English, makes pronunciation and intonation more automatic, builds that crucial muscle memory for articulation, and fosters confidence in continuous output.
It ties everything together.
It really does.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's this daily, persistent effort combined with patience that leads to the breakthrough. Moving from hesitant, effortful, slow talk to natural, flowing, and confident communication, where speaking English starts to feel less like a laborious task and more like an effortless extension of your thoughts.
So wrapping this all up then,
Yeah.
what does this deep dive mean for you, the listener, the learner, who's looking to truly master English and maybe finally banish that frustrating slow talk from your vocabulary forever? We've seen pretty clearly from this guide that becoming truly fluent isn't just about being born in an English-speaking country or even just memorizing 1,000 grammar rules. It's much more about deliberate strategic practice.
And changing how you think.
Yeah, strategic thinking that actively bypasses translation and really a profound willingness to step outside your comfort zone again and again. It seems it's all about transforming that internal slow talk, all the hesitation, the mental translation, the fear of mistakes, into natural, confident conversation that just flows freely and authentically.
Indeed. The insights from Mastering Native English Fluency, a comprehensive guide, really emphasize that English shouldn't be treated just as a subject to be studied, like history or math. It's a dynamic, living tool.
A way to connect.
Exactly, a way to connect with the world and express yourself fully without that constant internal friction. By consciously surrounding yourself with the language, actively retraining your internal monologue to think directly in English, embracing active speaking practice, yes, even talking to yourself, and purposefully focusing on fluid communication over rigid perfection.
Then you can really unlock it.
You really can unlock a whole new level of fluency and overcome those frustrating barriers like slow talk that hold so many capable learners back.
Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over after this deep dive. If the greatest barrier to natural flowing English often isn't really a lack of knowledge, but rather that deeply ingrained fear of imperfection that manifests as debilitating slow talk.
What's one small, maybe even deliberately imperfect step you can take today, like right after listening to this, to just start speaking more? Forget perfect, just speak. Knowing that every single utterance, however flawed or hesitant it might feel right now, is actually a crucial step towards achieving that true, uninhibited fluency you're aiming for. Go out there and start talking.